I'd follow on that in a minute. But on the Supreme Court, just one more question on the Supreme Court and the President's comments Monday. Does he regret using the word unprecedented?
Not at all, because as I've said a couple of times now, the President was referring to making the unremarkable observation about 80 years of Supreme Court history. Since the Lochner era, well, only because a handful of people didn't seem to understand what he was referring to. Of course he was referring to the fact that it would be unprecedented in the modern era of the Supreme Court, since the New Deal era, for the Supreme Court to overturn legislation passed by Congress designed to regulate and deal with a matter of national economic importance like our healthcare system. That is a fact. Since the Lochner era, which ended when the Court began to defer to Congress on New Deal legislation, the Supreme Court has not done that, has not broken the precedent set there, and that's a number of years now. That's what would be unprecedented about it. He did not suggest, did not mean and did not suggest that the Court, it would be unprecedented for the Court to rule that a law was unconstitutional. That's what the Supreme Court is there to do. But it has, under the Commerce Clause, deferred to Congress's authority in matters of national economic importance.
But on that point, Republicans
Ed.
were mentioning. Thank you. The risk of being intemperate. I just wanted to ask.
Never.
80 years of precedent you keep talking about, but Republicans are pointing to, I think it's 159 different times in the history of America where the Supreme Court has decided that something is not unconstitutional. Obviously not all of those times involving the Commerce Clause, which is the caveat.
Well, none of them in the last 85 years, and that's what the President was talking about.
But there's 159
So
times the Court
if they are
has said it's
citing,
unconstitutional.
if they are citing times when the Court ruled as unconstitutional something under the Commerce Clause that Congress did, they're basically saying they shouldn't have passed some of the New Deal legislation, and perhaps they want to revisit that. But the precedent we're talking about here, as I've made clear, I mean, you can say that they make this argument about precedent based on something the President didn't say or mean, or we can talk about...
But to be clear, he didn't specify what you're specifying now.
He did yesterday.
Yesterday. But in his original comments, he did not
but
draw out that caveat. He just said the whole thing would be unprecedented.
That's not what he said, Ed. That's not certainly what he meant. And it was clear to most folks who observe this and understand what is at issue here.
Jay, that's not true. The President said on Monday that it would be an unprecedented, extraordinary step of overturning a law that was passed by a strong majority of a Democratic elected Congress. It took him yesterday to talk about the Commerce Clause and on an economic issue.
Nora,
there are two instances in the past 80 years where the Supreme Court has overturned stuff. U.S. versus Lopez and U.S. versus
Nora, what I'm telling you...
These are very specific legal issues. It's not evident to everybody.
Well, it may not be evident to you. It is clear that the President was talking about matters like this that involve the Commerce Clause, that involve Congress passing legislation to deal with issues of national economic importance. National economic matters like health insurance, which is clearly a national economic issue. That's what he was referring to. And you know, again, he spoke to this yesterday. It is obvious and clear, and nobody would ever contend in his office, and he certainly was not contending, that the Supreme Court doesn't have as its right and responsibility the ability to overturn laws passed by Congress as unconstitutional. He was referring to 85 years of judicial precedent, of Supreme Court precedent, with regard to matters like the one under consideration. And it's maybe fun to pretend he meant otherwise, but everyone here knows that that's what he meant. Ed.
Okay. But to quote what Nora just quoted, back to Nora.
For the sake of argument, we're going to pretend he didn't mean that.
No, okay, but
He had to clarify.
I'm telling
He
you.
did clarify the next day.
and also when you said, well, to Nora or me,
I'm not
that maybe
disagreeing.
we didn't know those cases. Do you think most average Americans know about a Supreme Court case from 75 years ago? Come on, I mean, most
But
people
what's
are
your
not
point, Ed? Are
legal
you
experts.
suggesting, I just want to know, are you suggesting
Because the
that he...
president left the impression that the whole thing would be unprecedented.
And I'm
He did
telling
not
you,
have a
and he
caveat.
told you, and others like me have said, actually on the day of as well as after, that what he meant and what he made clear yesterday, and he was a law professor,
Right.
and he understands constitutional law and constitutional precedent and the role of the Supreme Court,
Okay.
was a reference to the Supreme Court's history in its rulings on matters under the Commerce Clause.
On what Nora quoted